You know, I got two sons. Joey is 31 and my son Clayton is 9. And I was playing catch with Clayton down in the basement at our house, and he threw it wild and he knocked over a can of fish food that sits on the top of the aquarium. And it toppled behind the aquarium. And I said, well, there goes that can. See, because a couple of years ago I accidentally knocked it off myself and it fell behind the aquarium and I wasn't able to get it. Because the aquarium is built into a niche in the wall and there's just a little bit of room on each side. And I can't get my arm, and it's too deep, and I can't get my arm on the side, and on the top I can get my arm across, but it's not long enough to get down. So Clayton goes over, and I said, forget it, Clayton. I said, I'll just pick up another can of fish food tomorrow. And he said, well, Dad, don't the fish want to eat before tomorrow night? And I said, you know, I suppose so. I said, but trust me, they won't die, you know, before tomorrow night. And he said, well, let me figure out how to get that fish food. I said, Clayton, I said, don't worry about it. And so he goes over to where his toys are and he gets his toy sword. And he comes back. I said, what are you going to do with that? And he said, I'm going to get the fish food. I said, I'll tell you what's going to happen. You're going to drop that sword and we're going to lose that too. And then I thought, wait a minute, I'm being pretty negative here. So I said, okay, Clayton, get the fish food. You know. And so he gets his head up and he looks over and he said, hey, Dad, he said, there's 2 cans of fish food back here. And I said, I know. I said, I dropped one a couple of years ago. And so he gets up there with the sword and he pushes one of the cans into the corner. Now, I had never thought about that. And so now we can see the fish food from the front. Now, my arm is too fat and his arm's not long enough, but at least we can see what we're trying to get. So he gets down with the sword and he wedges the can in the corner and he starts lifting it up. And he says, now, stay there, Dad, I'm going to need you in a minute. So he gets the can almost all the way up to the top of the aquarium. He says, now, can you grab it? So I reach across and I grab it, and we got the can back. And he said, let me get the other can while I'm at it. So he scrapes it into the corner, wedges it in, lifts it up, and then I reach across and grab it. We got both cans. And I said, Clayton, I said, man, you're unbelievable. And he said, Dad, he said, don't you know? He said, a Pusateri never gives up. And I said, you're right, Clayton, you're absolutely right.